Thank you for joining me today for the first episode of Still Time for Joy. I want to take a moment to tell you what the show is about and why I created it. I'm blessed to have a career working as a television producer, filmmaker, and speaker, but for about 20 years, I juggled those roles plus motherhood with two harrowing stints as a caregiver. First for my husband Michael, who nearly died from a brain injury before very slowly making a remarkable recovery, and then for my mom Dorothy, who suffered for over a decade with Alzheimer's disease before passing away 2 years ago. In both cases, our lives turned into chaos with almost unbearable stress, sleepless nights, and crippling grief. During those difficult years, I learned so much, both about the best ways to advocate for a loved one with a devastating illness, and about the joyful ups and crushing downs of caregiving. Still Time for Joy was born because I feel compelled to share those lessons learned to help others like you who may be struggling with life's challenges too. The show is full of practical advice about weathering life's storms and ideas for promoting healing through all kinds of self-care. And we'll meet amazing people who have turned their pain into purpose. They'll share their inspiring, joyful stories of resilience. Today, May 7th, would have been my beloved mom's 94th birthday. In her honor, I'm starting this show right now with an episode about caregiving for someone you love with dementia.
If you are starting to pick up groceries for your loved one, you're already a caregiver. If you are going to the doctors with them to hear what the doctor's trying to say, you are already a caregiver. Don't bury your head in the sand. You are in it. Build your tribe. Not just the professionals that can help you, but the friends and the family that will support you and the person you're caregiving for in a way that is helpful and not harmful. If you're finding people where the narrative is nothing but doom and gloom, move on. Find the people like yourself who can say, yeah, there's joy here. There's laughter here. And that's very healing. Those are the people you want as your support network.
Caregiving for a loved one living with a serious long-term illness like Alzheimer's disease can be isolating and overwhelming. Today's episode of Still Time for Joy is designed for you if you're new to the complex world of caregiving and you're looking for straight answers. Hello, I'm Sandra Levine, host of Still Time for Joy. Caregiving is sacred work that's also guaranteed to bring up all kinds of emotions like grief, frustration, even anger, and sometimes intense joy. My guest today is Deb Hallisey, who is a caregiver for her own mother and decided to use her newfound knowledge to help other caregivers navigate these sometimes very tricky waters. Hello, Deb, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sandra, for having me. I really am looking forward to it.
So many people, it seems, who go through caregiving wind up using their experiences to try to help others, and that's a big part of what this show is about. What made you decide to turn the knowledge that you learned into helping other people?
You know, it was my mother. I had lost my job due to caregiving issues, and she said to me kind of off the cuff, you know, you've learned so much, you should use it to help other people. And that just sent me down a completely different career path.
Losing your job to caregiving, did you actually get fired or did you have to quit on your own?
No, I got let go. I got let go. So I had a long career in consulting. And after my dad died, my company gave me about 3 months at home to get my mother settled. But at the end of the year, when they didn't make their numbers and I had not contributed what I was supposed to because I wasn't billing, they said, okay, well, bye. And it was one of the hardest things that ever happened, and it's one of the best things that ever happened. And I get it. I'd been a consultant for 30 years, and it's all about the numbers.
And I think a lot of people who've never been through the experience of caregiving for somebody who needs a lot of help don't realize how it disrupts your entire world.
Yep, 100%.
So you decided to create a website called Advocate for Mom and Dad. It has comprehensive resources. There's a blog that you write on it. You also do speaking. How do you help people who are facing the caregiver challenge?
I think there's two pieces to it. One, which is when you tell your story, people can relate to it and they can recognize that all those emotions they're feeling are perfectly natural and, in fact, okay to have them. It just depends on what you do with them. So I was very lucky, and my mom allowed me to be very honest about our journey. And then the other thing, the other way that I help is educating people and helping them to understand not only the resources that are out there, but the importance of having things like a power of attorney and why it was so important to me. And one of my favorite quotes is, nobody has caregiving on their bucket list. And that is the truth. So we don't prepare for it. And it oftentimes comes about in like 9 minutes, which is one phone call. And so you are suddenly thrown into chaos, and helping people navigate that chaos and helping people understand that you can come up for air is really what I try and do.
And noticed on your website, one of the things you talk about, or the questions you try to help people answer, is what do I do and where do I start? And there's a lot of things you need to do to help in caregiving that can go on for years. What would be the most important things to do at the beginning?
Don't keep it a secret. In that initial diagnosis and coming to terms with it, we so often don't tell anyone. And the person who got the diagnosis will say to us, I don't want anybody to know. I mean, dementia now was like cancer was. You went, he has cancer, right? You whispered it. But if you keep it a secret, you lose the opportunity to put everything in place that you need in place, and you lose the opportunity to put your support group in place. You may not tell it to everyone, but being able to say, I need to share this with whomever, so I have support, is really, really important.
And how do you build that tribe if you either don't have, let's just use an example, you're caregiving for your parents. I mean, it could be anybody, but say you're caregiving for your parents, and perhaps you have a couple siblings, they don't live nearby, or perhaps you're an only child.
Well, I think it starts with a couple ways. First of all, start to look at what professional help you can get, right? From a support group to an elder law attorney to just talking to an aging life care advisor, a care specialist. So start to educate yourself as much as you can. Go out to the Alzheimer's organization. There's something called ALZ Authors, ALZ Authors, with lots of books and podcasts. Find Teepa Snow, Teepa Snow. She's like one of the premier educators on how to work with people who have a dementia. Just watching her videos would be hugely helpful. And then the second thing to do is look at who are your family and who are your friends. And if they've had caregiving experiences, they are particularly helpful to you. The one thing I will say is your family of origin, your siblings, at times, or maybe always, are not going to be able to help you in the way you want them to or expect them to, for a lot of reasons. And so if you don't have your family of origin, look to your family of choice. And for me, that was friends, my church community, my colleagues. That was really important to me.
Now, you've also written a couple of books, including A Relationship Contract for Dementia Caregivers. I'm very intrigued by the idea of a caregiver contract. Tell me, why would a caregiver need a contract? What does that mean? Is this a written contract or just a discussion to have?
Well, first of all, it's not a written contract, and it's based on the way we are in relationship to one another, which we never talk about, right? So the way I look at it is, what are you willing or unwilling to do for that other person? How do you validate and support them in the way that they need? And what are the social activities that bind you together? And it really came from the realization that once you become a caregiver, that unspoken contract you had with everyone in your life, not just the person you're caring for, gets changed. And so you really are forced to renegotiate that in a way that it requires you to be intentional and self-aware. And so helping people to understand those unspoken expectations and how we need to recognize them and talk about them and then bring things out in the open is a huge part of my work, actually, and how I try to help people.
So, how would one of those conversations go?
I think one of the good examples is setting a boundary. And that boundary could be a request for help, it could be a request for emotional support, it could be a request to not do something. And too often, especially in the heat of the moment, we will start that conversation with you must, you should, you never. And that language has the person leaving either physically or emotionally. So you never want to start, whether you're setting a boundary or asking for help, whatever that is, you never want to start with the you must, you should, you never. You always want to start with an I statement. I'm exhausted. I'm overwhelmed. I need your help. I find this frustrating. And then a concern of some kind. The first boundary I'd ever set with my mother was needing to change something in our nighttime routine. And the way I did it was said, Mom, I'm overwhelmed and exhausted in the routine we have to do at night. I need to change one thing in this routine. Where can we put the toothbrush and the toothpaste in the kitchen? Because every night I had to carry that from the bathroom to the kitchen and back, and it made my head explode. So it's that I statement, I'm overwhelmed and exhausted. It's an expression of a concern. I need your help. Where can we put this? But you never end it with something they can say yes or no to. You end it with an open-ended question like, where in the kitchen could we put it? Or two options. Would you like to put it in this drawer or this drawer? Because if it ends with a no, you have no place to go.
You mentioned in your book that the original caregiver contract can be with your loved one, but then as you go along, as the disease progresses, the contract becomes with yourself. What do you mean by that?
So in that early stage, you can still reason and have discussions. And I will say the most important discussions to have are, how do you want to live out your life, and making sure all the legal documents are in place. But once you're in the middle to late stage, having those conversations are simply not possible. And so the contract with yourself becomes, for example, putting together a care plan. Okay, what am I going to do for respite? If I get sick and mom or dad needs to go to the doctors, who will be able to take them if I can't, and what would that look like? If I had to make a decision because I could no longer keep them at home, who can I rely on to help me find the best place, right? So it's support for yourself. But over and above that, I think what is most important is all those skills about using the right language and asking for and help and setting boundaries become even more critical with the other people in your life. One of the hardest things when you're caring for someone with dementia as time goes on are the holidays, right? Everybody's expectation is that we will continue to have a huge party, Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, whatever it is. And that huge party with all the sound, all the noise, all the grandkids running around is not healthy for the person with dementia or for you. So you need to help the people in your life to understand by having conversations, by writing a letter, by setting a boundary that says, Mom doesn't know which day is Christmas Eve. And having everybody here is way too overwhelming. So what we need to do is have multiple Christmas Eves and just make the amount of people shorter. And oh, by the way, we may have met for brunch, but that's mom's nap time and I cannot change her routine. So we're going to meet for lunch a little later. It's doing what you need to do to preserve your mental, emotional, and physical health. The contract is with yourself, preserving yourself.
So, when I was caregiving for my mom, I was a little surprised about some of the emotions that came up as I was going through the experience. What are some of the most common emotions that caregivers feel that people may be surprised by who haven't done it before?
Oh, the negative ones are easy, really easy to name. Anger, frustration, guilt, yeah. I mean, you think of any negative emotion and you're going to feel it. Well, you're going to be angry that your life is no longer the same. You're going to be frustrated that every day can be different. And, one day they were willing to take a shower and the next day they're not. And you're going to feel so guilty when you lose your mind and yell at them, when you know that they're not trying to drive you crazy, right? All of those are normal emotions and you are going to feel them. And the hardest thing and the worst thing to do is when we beat ourselves up and feel guilty about it. One of the things that people say is that every day is new for someone with dementia, and that is true. But it also gives you grace to say, tomorrow I will do better. Tomorrow it will be different. But the other thing is, I don't think people realize that even within dementia, there can be laughter and great joy, but it means letting go of the way you have the expectations for the way that person is going to be and feel, and living into their reality and living into that moment and giggling with them if they say something that doesn't make sense and saying, oh, mom, you didn't get married in May, you got married in April. Why are you correcting them? Does it really matter? It doesn't. And if you are always correcting them and not looking for the joy and being in the moment and in their reality, you will always be negative and frustrated and angry and guilty and exhausted.
I was very surprised by how much fun I had with my mom and so happy that we could have so much joy together, even right till the very end. And, Alzheimer's is just a terrible disease. It robbed my mom of everything, as it does everybody who goes through it. But we would have little moments of just so much joy because we had fun together. We laughed together, and it did become a matter of meeting her where she was. And if you went with the flow, it went better. And I learned that from the caregivers who had experience because my mom lived at home for a long time and had a live-in with her. And I watched that live-in go with the flow with things that I couldn't believe she was going along with. And at first I was like, why don't you do XYZ? And she's like, what would the point of that be? You just have to go with the flow. And I learned from her. And so we did have a lot of joy and a lot of fun and a lot of laughter. But there was lots of tears and anguish, of course, as well. And I want to get back to you about the languaging. And you write in your book about the danger of parenting the parent. And that's really hard to have the patience not to take over and not to just say, this is the way we're going to do it. What does that mean? Don't parent the parent. What is that? How do you get anywhere in what you're trying to accomplish if you don't sort of take control?
That parenting the parent, I think, is true for all stages, but there's always flexibility in that. With a diagnosis of a memory impairment, Alzheimer's, Lewy body, whatever it is, vascular dementia, it's devastating. And but it isn't, it's a death sentence, but it's not tomorrow. And so I think so often as caregivers, we try and do everything for them when they can still be doing things for themselves. And if you take away what they can do for themselves too early, you are robbing them of the life that they have left. Might you have to wait a little longer for mom to get ready to go out? Yeah, so you build in more time, right? But taking over too soon without letting them live as independently and safely as possible is what I mean by not parenting your parent. The other thing is they're resistant to showering. And you like, come on, we got to go, we got to go, we got to go, right? Well, A, do they need to shower every day? Maybe not, so letting go of that. And B, put on music and dance down the hallway together. And then go into that bathroom that is already nice and warm, because that's going to help them to be ready to shower or bathe. Go in there, have it be nice and warm, and then make a game out of taking their clothes off. Whatever it takes to get them to do what you need them to do without sounding like a parent is really what I'm talking about.
How do you think as a country we're doing with caregiving for our elderly and supporting people through dementia? I know there are efforts being made to help support caregivers financially because of the tremendous financial toll it takes on caregivers when they're doing so much for another person and they're not able to work like they used to. Where does that all stand?
We are woefully ill prepared. Full stop. Even mild cognitive impairment requires that somebody step up and do additional things for you, right? So we are woefully ill prepared. I mean, and I don't mean just in supporting the caregiver, I mean in finding professional caregivers, these certified home health aides, the certified nursing assistants who will work in a community or work in your home. There is a recognition by the Medicaid and Medicare group, CMS, by Congress and by the president right now that we need to do more, but they can't solve all the problems. My hope is that businesses will step up even more through employee programs, through funding, through grants, whatever it is, because we have to, as a nation, find a way to solve this. It's not going to be one person or one group.
And I think that's one of the most important things I want to talk about today is the idea that, especially again, if you're dealing with someone with dementia, it's not something you can do by yourself. You can start out doing it by yourself, and very quickly it's going to take up all of your time. And then it comes to a point where one person can't do it by themselves. People do start to wander often as the disease progresses, and it's impossible for one person to watch somebody 24/7.
You've got the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, which works only if you are in fact with a company for a year, which is one of the reasons I lost my job, because I hadn't been with that consulting firm for a year yet. So making sure that that is available for caregivers. I think the bigger thing, though, is if someone is still working, recognizing that they need flexibility, whether it's working from home 3 days a week, or whether it's working different hours, or whether it's job sharing. Frankly, things that they've been doing for new parents for a while needs to happen on the other end of the spectrum. The infrastructure is in place, right? We just need to apply it to a different group. My worry is less about the adult children and more about the spouses, because they grew up in a time where nobody was to know your business, and so you didn't ask for help. And their support system is often gone. Their siblings are gone, their friends are gone, they've been isolated because they're older, and they're the ones who I worry about the most, because they don't know where to ask for help, how to ask for help, and they don't feel like they can, because for better or for worse, this is my spouse.
And there can be a lot of a spouse covering for their spouse to hide the fact that things are not going as well as they'd like you to believe.
And then the kids are shocked. Oh my God, I didn't know mom was doing this. And you're like, oh, well, yeah.
There's another thing I read either on your website or in your book that was so interesting. And you said that grief underlies caregiving like a river. I thought that was brilliant. Tell us what you mean by that.
there are so many forms of grief. There's anticipatory grief, and that can be anticipating the loss of someone, but it can also be anticipating, as a caregiver, your loss of the life as you knew it and financial stability. There's ambiguous loss, ambiguous grief, which is where you are losing the person in front of you, even though they're still in front of you, right?
Sure.
And so I say it underlies it like a river, because until that person dies, society doesn't recognize our grief and doesn't allow us to talk about it. And yet, if we don't recognize it and we don't talk about it, you'd be shocked by how often that comes out as anger and frustration and all those negative emotions. I can remember watching my mom, who was blind, try and put ketchup on the dish, and she missed the dish, right? I could have been like, oh my God, Mom, why don't you let me do it for her? Instead, I thought, wow, this is really hard and this is really sad, because this is one more loss. And that was acknowledging grief. And I needed to do that, because in doing that, I could let go of the anger that she had missed the dish and I had a mess to clean up.
I know that you work as a consultant with families. How do you help families? How does that work evolve over time? And what can you provide to families who hire you to work as a consultant?
So much of it, in fact, is counseling. I mean, it really is counseling. And then the other half of that is education. You know, this is the situation, what do I do? And it's rarely one session. It usually goes on for a little while, because to give everybody all the information they need in one session, they would lose their minds. So that you help them prioritize. Okay, so what are the first things you need to do, and what are the resources you can find? I do not do that for them in a way that an aging life care specialist might. I help them find the resources, and then we'll set up, okay, when we're done with that, or when you need, let's talk in a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever it is. Okay, tell me how you did. Is there more we need to do about that? Now let's take that next chunk and let's work on that. And a lot of it has turned out to be communications, and how do you effectively communicate with family members and other people. And if somebody can say to you, I know how hard this is, and not try and fix it, that means the world to a caregiver. You kind of just sit in the mud with them and say, I know this is really hard, and I know you're grieving, and I'm with you. And it depends on what they need, but more and more, it's really about effective communications, particularly with family. And it's interesting, because I've had people who were caregiver for a parent and then became caregiver for a spouse, and they've come back to me, and we've worked through that as well.
And I want to know if you feel in your new work, helping caregivers, advocating for caregivers and the elderly, do you feel that you found your purpose?
Oh, 100%. I will never go back to corporate. Never. And the thing that I think is so interesting is I was 58 when I lost my job. And so that's why I say it was one of the hardest things and one of the best things. At 58, I feel like I found my calling and my voice, and it has been such a gift. I was working with family caregivers, and one of the ladies said to me, I have your book, and it saved my life. And I was like, what? Tell me more. And she said, well, you gave me permission to put my sister aside, who was so toxic to me and what I needed to do for my mom. And I did it. And I said, well, if I helped, I am thankful for that. And thank you for letting me know. It's just amazing, But that was like so reaffirming. There's nothing better than knowing you have touched somebody's life in a positive way. Nothing better.
Thank you so much, Deb. This is wonderful to talk to you and learn all these things about caregiving and dementia. I know that we'll talk again. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for having me, and the best of luck with the podcast. It's needed. It really is.
Thank you so much. If you found today's show helpful, please share the information with someone who needs it, and follow Still Time for Joy for more practical tips on weathering life's storms as well as inspiring stories of people who have turned their pain into purpose. Please consider supporting the work that goes into producing the show on Patreon. Follow Sandra Levine Productions on Facebook and YouTube, and learn more at sandralevine.com.